Chapter 17. Something in the Mind. City of the Iron Tower, France, some time ago. They began a short while after the scanners had rematerialized Alita into the real world. The strongest of headaches, taking her by surprise and leaving her breathless. Literally breathless! The cause of these headaches was incomprehensible, and yet at the same time utterly simple. Alita was still connected somehow or other to the virtual world of Lyoko. It still retained one trace of her. A painful memory. This inexplicable connection had been dramatically evident when they had tried to extinguish the supercomputer. Alita had collapsed onto the floor, senseless, lifeless. "Back on, Jeremy! Turn the computer back on!" they had shouted in the darkness of the factory's underground installation. Once again, Jeremy pushed the master switch down into its on position, and on that day they understood a simple truth. The supercomputer could not be shut down, because killing its power would also kill Alita. He had turned the issue over and over in his mind. Eventually, he had concluded that the root of the problem lay in the girl's modified memory sectors, which he himself had deleted to allow her to escape Lyoko. An unbreakable connection, and a problem too complex for him to overcome. And then there was Xana. Even if they still did not understand who or what it was, beyond the fact that it was unpredictable and malicious, Jeremy had begun to suspect that the connection between Alita and Lyoko was somehow related to Xana's existence. But there were still too many mysteries, too many questions without answers, and a malignant, throbbing presence that overshadowed them and denied them a peaceful night's sleep. Up until that evening, the evening when everything changed. The cursor on Jeremy's computer monitor suddenly started moving by itself. One letter at a time, a word appeared, and then it finally formed a sentence. "I've finally found you." The boy stared wide-mouthed at the chat window that had appeared on the screen. For a moment he was uncertain of what he should do next, until his curiosity got the better of him. Nervously, he began to run his fingers over the keys. "Who are you?" "I am Franz Hopper." Jeremy started. It can't be. He felt a cold shiver of terror run down the length of his back. What if this was actually Xana he was in contact with? The artificial intelligence seemed obsessed with anything relating to Alita and her father, his creator. Jeremy remained frozen, his fingers poised over the keyboard. "I am not Xana. I can prove it. Ask me anything you like. Subject me to the Turing test." Jeremy read the new message, petrified. It seemed as if whoever was writing to him could read his thoughts. He did not know how to react, or even if he should. One was forced to reflect. What did they actually know about Xana? That it was an artificial entity from an artificial world, and that it could take control of access towers and so connect to electronic equipment in the real world. So maybe it could also travel through the internet. Why not? Perhaps Xana had access to every databank and database in the world. It could obtain any scientific text, elaborate strategies, and perform calculations at the speed of light. Perhaps. Or maybe all Jeremy had to do was shut his computer down, just close the chat window and go to bed. "Listen to me. In what way is a plumber like a doctor? Both bury their mistakes. Do I look like Xana to you? Would it ever tell a joke? Honestly, it has no sense of humor." Jeremy smiled. "Neither do you. Your joke is terrible. On this I concede to your logic." "Why did you contact me?" "We must delete it." "Delete what?" "Xana." Jeremy shook his head, more and more confused. "But who is Xana?" This time he had to wait several seconds for the answer. "The enemy." Spaghetti bolognese was perhaps the worst food to ever come out of Caddick's kitchens. Rosa, the lunch lady, was a good cook, but pasta was definitely not her strong suit. The spaghetti always ended up clumping together in a shapeless, sticky heap, while the meat sauce was too wet and quickly percolated through to the bottom of the plate, forming a small red lake of indefinable flavor. Despite this, Odd had cheerfully devoured his portion and quickly appropriated those of Yumi and Alita. "You're disgusting, Odd," commented Ulrich. "That's what you always say. Odd, you're disgusting. Odd, you're like a pigsty. The truth is that I can't stand to see food go to waste." "Have any of you seen Jeremy?" Yumi asked, changing the subject. "No, he's not attending classes today." "I saw him this morning," Alita added. "He was working on his computer." Odd sucked avidly at a skein of matted pasta as big as a rugby ball, shaking his head. "He's going to make himself ill if he keeps this up." At that moment, William Dunbar appeared at the bottom of the table and approached them, a dinner tray in his hands. "Mind if I sit?" Ulrich did not deign so much as to look up from his plate. "Much as it displeases me, I suspect your being here is not an accident." "Why's that? You guys need the space to sit and share the secrets of your little exclusive club with yourselves?" "Maybe." William looked about ready to hurl the contents of his tray all over Ulrich, but he restrained himself. "Have it your way, then. I think I've lost my appetite anyway." At that instant, Alita's phone started ringing. "What did you say? What? My father? Jeremy, this isn't funny." But it was no joke. Aelita, Ulrich, Yumi, and Odd materialized onto Lyoko for what was to be the last time. An elf, a samurai, a Japanese geisha, and a cat boy with a long purple tail. For Aelita, returning to the virtual world felt like a cold shower. She was not alone in this feeling. They were in the ice sector. In front of them, the diamond-colored plain rose into a mountain, its snowy peaks interconnected with crystal bridges. From the highest peak, a cascade of water fell in a silvery shower of rain, pooling at the bottom in a sparkling little lake. The sensation of being in a false reality was even stronger here than usual. The icy white surfaces showed no reflections. The group's shadows gave the impression that they were walking several centimeters above the ground. "Where's my father?" demanded Aelita, looking around herself. "Hiding somewhere in the vicinity of the waterfall," Jeremy's voice answered within their ears. "But don't expect to recognize him easily. He has informed me that he has not taken a human form." "This smells like a trap to me," Ulrich hissed. "I've got an ugly feeling that Xana's behind it." "That's why we're here as well," Yumi expounded. "Aelita won't be in any danger if we stick with her." In the control room under the old factory, Jeremy bit his lip. In his heart, he hoped that Yumi was right, but the truth was, as always, that Aelita was risking more than anyone else. Even after rematerialization, she still did not possess any life points, but he remained silent. The troop moved towards the waterfall, which was pouring into the little lake, creating a thin and intangible mist. The lake, its surface as smooth as a metal plate, could only be crossed by a little bridge that had disappeared under the vertical column of falling water. Odd set off across it first. Although gallons of water were pouring out from the mountain every second, he could not hear any noise. An eerie silence had settled across the ice. "What's behind the waterfall, Jeremy?" "The 5th sector, the core of Lyoko." "The one without a name?" "Right, the one without a name." "And what's in there, in the core of Lyoko?" "I haven't the least idea." "Well, let's go. Stay on your guard, guys." About halfway across the bridge, Aelita stopped. "You wait here. I must go on alone." "Have you lost your marbles?" Aelita shook her head. "It's my father that's over there." "We're not 100% sure of that," Ulrich insisted. "No, but I can feel it's him. And if that's the case, it might be better if we could speak in private." Yumi nodded. "She's right, boys. It's her life. This is her moment." Aelita smiled, grateful. Then she turned to advance alone across the bridge, one step in front of another, while the others three watched her go, standing their ground with their weapons in hand. When Aelita was almost right under the fall, she braced herself for the spray, but felt nothing. The water droplets were landing on her skin for a moment and then sliding off without wetting it. They were only an illusion. Hidden behind the waterfall was a low-ceilinged cave, its floor submerged into the waters of the lake. The bridge described a great arch over the silvery liquid. And there, at the highest point, hovering in midair over the surface of the lake, there was a bright sphere. Aelita could not take her eyes off it, enchanted. It seemed to be alive. Whirls and eddies of light pulsed within it, followed by millions of tiny explosions in all the colors of the rainbow. Aelita. The sphere had spoken her name. Aelita recognized that voice in an instant. Unable to hold back her emotion, she ran up to the edge of the bridge and stretched out her arm to try and touch it. But the sphere remained at an unreachable distance, a few centimeters beyond her fingertips. "My little girl, you've grown so much. I'm so very proud of you." "Daddy!" Virtual tears, cold and tasteless, were running down the elf's face. "I wish that we had more time, my treasure," continued the sphere. "Time to explain things. Time for us. But time is a luxury I can't afford. He is coming." "Xana!" "It's a threat to us all. We must destroy it." The girl nodded. "We'll do it together, Daddy." "I know we will, but it won't be easy. It will do everything in its power to stop us." "Daddy, I've missed you so much." "And I you, my little dear. You can't imagine how much. Every moment since I was forced to leave you on your own, all those years I've done nothing but think of you and your mother and Thea. And our family." Aelita was there, immersed in that unreal and aseptic environment, and with a knot in her throat that she hoped would never thaw. The being in front of her was only a sphere of light, but that voice, that warm, resounding voice, that was the voice of her father, and it had just spoken the name of her mother. A part of her wanted to scream, "Daddy, please come and hug me. Who cares about Xana and all the rest of it? I need you." But another part of her had to know. "Daddy, where is my mother?" she asked, her voice thin and weak. "I don't know, my darling, but she is alive, and you must search for her. I've left something for you in the hermitage. It's hidden well, but I'm certain that you can find it." "Why can't we find it together, Daddy?" "Because I myself no longer know where it is, not anymore. As time has gone by, I have had to forget certain memories so that he may not possess them." At a stroke, the sphere started and began to rotate on itself as its internal currents intensified. "Xana," it murmured, "he's noticed us." In the supercomputer's great control hall, Jeremy was sat immobile in front of the main screen, his hands resting on the keyboard. Around him, the hall was immersed in darkness, illuminated at intervals by flickering bursts of bright light and inscriptions that caught fire and died like flashes of lightning. Jeremy would have preferred to not have eavesdropped on that long conversation, but the monitor showed him everything that took place on Lyoko, and in any case, the supercomputer transmitted every uttered word and sigh directly to him. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he did not notice a shadow moving furtively behind him, approaching his position at the workstation. Nor did he see a hand rise up behind his shoulders, clench in a fist, and then beat down on his fair-haired head. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious. William Dunbar, their schoolmate, the boy of whom Ulrich was so jealous, looked down at him with a satisfied air and smiled. Around the frozen lake, the air suddenly seemed to become charged with electricity, for behind a spur of ice, Xana's monsters appeared in their hundreds, like a swarm of maddened insects. Yumi was the first to see them. "Over here!" she cried. "I said it was a trap," yelled Ulrich. In a flash, the team was submerged in a rain of laser bolts. Yumi threw her fans, but the number of enemies was too great. She was struck tens of times and dissolved into a puff of blue pixels. She re-emerged from the scanner column panting. "Jeremy?" she asked, catching her breath. "How are the others doing?" But from the virtualization room's loudspeakers there was no response. Yumi ascended to the level and called him again. "Jeremy?" Her friend was sprawled on the ground. His glasses lay beside him with their legs bent upwards, forlornly twisted. William Dunbar was sitting at the control console, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "What have you done here?" Yumi cried, horrified. "How can you do this to—" Very slowly, William turned to face her. "Hello, my treasure," he croaked. His fascinatingly dark eyes had vanished. In their place, two unnatural fires burned with a blue light. They were the eyes of Xana. "Oh no! William, no!" Yumi was given no opportunity to try to understand how this had happened. Out of the boy's throat there came a howling scream devoid of any humanity. William leapt from the armchair and charged her so quickly that she had no time to react, seizing her by her t-shirt. Yumi was flung across the room. Her back slammed against the wall with such force that all the air was knocked out of her lungs, leaving her breathless. After several seconds she achingly rose to her feet. She aimed for the doors of the lift and threw herself in that direction, faster than she believed possible. "Jeremy!" she cried. One of the hands of the boy sprawled on the floor was moving weakly, probing across the floor in search of his glasses. Yumi did not stop. She was not exactly sure of what she was doing, but she knew that she had to get William out of that room. Inside Lyoko, in the ice sector, Odd and Ulrich reacted in surprise as the monsters appeared to retreat, flowing back behind the mountains from which they had appeared only a few minutes beforehand. "Aha!" Odd exulted. "Look, we've routed them! They're trying to escape!" "I don't think they're escaping from us. They easily outnumbered us." "So what then?" "Well, it seems like it might be a strategic retreat, or—" At that moment, the side of the mountain began to tremble unexpectedly. Then the shock transferred into the ground, and the ice beside them slid apart, carving out a deep crack. The flow of water over the falls dramatically increased in intensity for several seconds and then slowed down abruptly, reduced to a mere trickle of drips. The world of Lyoko started vibrating before their eyes, and the sensation of dizziness created by the virtual environment struck home with far more force than usual. "Do you think that Aelita needs our help?" asked Odd. "I don't know about her, but we certainly do." "Why's that?" "Look there," Ulrich indicated. From behind the ice spires a gigantic creature had emerged. It was tall enough to be able to cross the entire mountain in a single stride. Its head was a white mass marked with a single eye. From the skull there sprouted black tentacles that resembled writhing dreadlocks. The colossus had human form, but the dimensions were incredible. It launched a punch against the flank of the mountain. A huge fragment of ice sheared off from the summit and crashed down into the lake, further widening the crevice that had been formed shortly beforehand. "Oh, crap!" murmured Odd, feeling his knees begin to tremble. "Odd! Ulrich!" Aelita's voice drew their attention. The girl was running along the ice bridge towards them, followed by a sphere of light that floated in the air behind her. She reached them in a few seconds. "This is my father," she said, indicating to the sphere. "Oh, good day, Mr. Hopper," Odd greeted him politely. He had never before had the opportunity to converse with a kind of novelty chandelier. "Am I right in hoping that you can help us beat that giant monster?" "Perhaps," answered the sphere, leaving Odd and Ulrich with their mouths hanging open. "But it is something that we must do together." "How?" "I was hoping that Jeremy would have told you." "Yeah, well, he's not been saying much of late." The Colossus took an immense step forward. The impact of its huge feet on the ice was devastating. The crack became a chasm that ran between the legs of the giant. It raised its arms toward the sky. A moment later, it brought its fists down and struck them against the ground, throwing up a wave of silver water that abruptly transformed and dissipated into a dense vapor. Follow me, said the sphere. It wants to prevent Aelita from being materialized. You go, Odd. Ulrich twirled his katana. The blade whistled through the air, casting reflections of blue light. I'll try to distract it somehow. Let's roll, Mr. Hopper, yelled Odd, turning to the sphere. Wherever you go, we'll follow. The Colossus unleashed another fist, and this blow drove the chasm as far as the lake, which trembled in protest as its waters began to drain away, spilling into the digital void that lurked beneath Lyoko. The sphere dived into the chasm, followed by Odd and Aelita. They landed immediately on a square platform of smooth rock, suspended in an endless abyss. On the computer display under the old factory, superimposed over the core sector of Lyoko, which up to this point had remained blank, a name appeared. Carthage. It was the name of a city without dimensions, composed of an infinite number of blue blocks and smooth, regular surfaces, each aligned and arranged beside the others with an almost painful, frightening precision. Hundreds of manta monsters were darting in each direction, gliding in the digital sky on great fins shaped like wings. They each had a long snout with two little mobile horns and a wide, flat, milky body. As soon as they noticed the intruders, they screeched an acute cry and began to converge on their position, firing clouds of lasers upon them. Odd, Aelita, and the sphere escaped under the crossfire, while the city of blue blocks seemed to infinitely shift and reconfigure itself beneath them. They found a second platform, and then a third, and ran at breakneck speed until they ran out of walkway. There was nowhere else to go. It was as if they had arrived simultaneously at both the center and the outer edge of the city. In front of them there materialized an undulating display, frameless. It's up to you now, Aelita. You must install the program, the sphere ordered from behind their backs. Which program? Jeremy knows. Jeremy, send me the data! Jeremy! She screamed, raising her eyes to the sky. But there was no answer. Odd was vaulting back and forth on his agile legs, his outstretched wrists firing laser arrows in all directions in a desperate attempt to protect the girl. Fortunately, the monsters were seemingly ignoring the two children, and were concentrating all their efforts on the sphere, which floated immobile in the air, attracting swarms of the creatures like flies. Little by little, their numbers were growing. Jeremy! Aelita screamed again in despair. I need the program! Please, no! Here I am, murmured Jeremy's voice, as if re-emerging from beyond the brink of the abyss. Where the heck have you been? There's been some complications. William... This isn't the time for a chat, I'd screamed. Jeremy, send this damn program! And you, Mr. Hopper, you've got to get away from here. You're too easy a target. The program, replied the sphere. Don't worry about me. Think of the program. Aelita placed her hands on the screen, and within a few seconds she had loaded the software sent by Jeremy onto Lyoko's memory. That's it, she announced eventually, lifting her hands away. But things were not going to be so easy. The girl examined the fluctuating screen. I've installed the program onto the system, Jeremy, but it won't run. It's giving me an error message. It's not an error, the boy stated. The supercomputer doesn't have enough processing power to execute the program. Can you explain me what purpose installing it served? Screamed Odd, who was still fighting furiously against multiple flying mantas. He was exhausted, like they all were. They were pitting themselves against an indomitable force, potentially infinite. Where can we get additional power from? Me, said the sphere. You can get additional processor capacity from me. Yumi was on the old factory's first floor, at the point where the metal balcony passed through the entryway and onto the iron suspension bridge. The situation cannot be described as cheerful, not at all. William was acting like a madman, and he was now superhumanly strong. While she ran along the factory's iron balconies, Yumi could feel the fear pressing in on her. Here in reality, she had no life points, nor her razor-sharp Tessin fans. What's more, she was still hurting badly from being thrown against the wall. Another blow like that would definitely knock her out. She could not fight him, but she could try to keep him away from the control room, and in the meantime, she could try to survive. She slipped between two bulkheads covered in rust, alert to any suspicious sound or movement, but evidently not alert enough. William came out of nowhere like a ghost and grabbed her by the base of the neck. Yumi tried to wriggle free, but her tennis shoes slid on the cement floor without finding purchase. Her hands groped for something. Help! She whispered weakly. Holding her by the throat, William drew her to him, ready to hurl her against one of the factory's brick walls. Then he seemed to change his mind. His face contracted into a derisive sneer. His eyes, in which the Xana symbol shone, flickered as if due to interference. Yumi felt him lift her upwards and realized that her shoes were no longer touching the ground. William swung her towards the gap, over the balcony's railing. It was at least a 5-meter drop. He was going to throw her down. Odd had learned that there was a limit for everything. By himself, for example, he could go head-to-head with 3 or 4 monsters, but not 100. He leapt onto the back of a passing manta, seized it by the horns, and led it upwards, to where thousands of the monsters were crowding round Hopper. The manta swerved, trying to throw him, but Odd braced his feet and refused to let go of his catch. "You damn monster!" he cried. Forcing it to rear up, he managed to take out a second and then a third monster. Then he saw only the first glimmer of a laser bolt as it was fired and struck him right between the eyes. Wham! A mechanical door slid to one side, and Odd found himself in the scanner hall. "Yumi? Jeremy?" he panted distraughtly. "Odd, are you back?" It was Jeremy's voice. He seemed frightened. "Run, quick! Yumi's on the level above me, and William Dunbar's there with her." "William Dunbar? And what he's doing here? And what's he doing here?" "It's not really William, it's Xana, and he's trying to kill her." "Oh, shit!" Odd sprang forward, not needing to say anything else. His heart was beating in his chest into an infernal rhythm, but he tried to ignore the deafening throbs. He staggered across to the lift, called it, and then pressed the red button that would take him up to the factory's ground floor. Up he went. Once above, he tried to make sense of where he needed to go. Disorientated, he looked around, retching at the stale odor of the dust. Then he heard something, a low moan. In the corner of his eye he glimpsed a movement, and turned to look in that direction. William was standing atop a scaffold. He was holding on to something, dangling over the chasm. "Hey, wait a moment, that was Yumi!" "No!" Odd cried instinctively. William saw him, directed a sadistic smile at him, and then let go of Yumi. Without thinking, Odd threw himself into a leap and dived in that direction. On the fringe of the frozen lake, which by now had decompiled into myriad fragments of code, Ulrich was still sparring with the Colossus. More accurately, he was running away from the monster with his tail between his legs. But that strategy did not seem to be working. He had to come up with something as soon as possible. He decided to crouch down amid the broken ice that surrounded him, waiting expectantly. Then he felt the heavy, resounding steps of the Colossus, made a prodigious forward bound, and forcefully drove his sword into the back of the monster's foot. Using the weapon as a handhold, he allowed himself to be carried along. The giant seemed unperturbed. It completed its step and shattered the last remnants of the Silver Lake. Ulrich clung to the hilt of the sword with all his strength. He managed to free the blade from the foot of the giant and jumped up again. This time he transfixed the sword in the center of the monster's thigh. He went up again. In this manner he continued his climb, up as far as the belt line. Here the slope became more difficult. The torso of the Colossus was like a great inverted shelf, impossible to scale. Instead, he waited until the giant's arm swung forward and then made a calculated jump to land on its gigantic hand, managing to plant his sword in one of the huge fingertips. At that point, the monster, which up to this moment had not even noticed his presence, reacted. The hand moved with incredible speed, and the boy had to slip into the hollow between its index and middle fingers to avoid being squashed. He realized that he had few options available to himself without external aid. "Jeremy!" he implored. "Do you read me? Jeremy!" "I'm here!" Jeremy screamed in Ulrich's ears. A moment before the Colossus again tried to crush him against the ground. This was not going well. This was really not going well. "Jeremy, I do something!" "I can't do anything, unless... Can you ride a motorbike?" "Jeremy!" Next to him, in the huge monster's palm, a little digital motorcycle appeared. The grip had loosened enough that Ulrich was able to slip out from between the fingers. He jumped onto the motorbike, threw his weight onto his wrist, and hit the accelerator. He rose along the slope of the thumb and dived into the gap beyond the nail. Now the climbing began again. The forearm, the elbow, dark and colored like scorched iron, the curve of the bicep. Now the Colossus was behaving like a person trying to swat a gnat. But instead of slowing down, Ulrich sped up further. The shoulder, the neck. At this point he folded up on the motorbike and released himself to spring upwards towards the white mass that shielded the face of the monster, which at that moment dipped and presented its single eye to him, the eye of Xana. Reacting, Ulrich drew his katana while still in midair. He rotated his arm and with every ounce of his strength drove the point of the katana into the black center of that horrible symbol. Ulrich's sword was like a pinprick to the giant. Nevertheless, it wavered. Hanging from the katana by both his arms, Ulrich tried to keep his focus. To maintain his grip, his teeth gritted. He pulled himself up and around with the strength in his arms until his feet were supported against the smooth surface of the mask. Then he pushed the katana in up to the hilt. The Colossus felt that blow. It swerved sharply to one side, and Ulrich found himself hurled into the air, a broken half of his sword in hand. Falling towards the ground, he curled up into a ball, did a somersault, and landed at his feet. The violence of the impact caused his teeth to snap together with enough force that for a moment Ulrich thought they had broken. But instead he found himself to be completely whole, including his teeth. He had no time to express his amazement. Quivering rapidly, the monster collapsed on him and disintegrated him. "Mr. Hopper," called Jeremy from his station, "we need that processing power right now." "I am ready, Jeremy," announced the sphere. "The last port is open." "Daddy, what do you mean?" begged Aelita. "What power are you talking about?" She was still on the platform surrounded by the mantas. She was tense with the effort of holding them back, having discovered she could project offensive energy fields from her hands, and now she was firing them at a rate even she found impossible to believe, filling the surrounding space with pink iridescence. There was no one else present, apart from her and the sphere. We don't have any time left, my dear, her father coaxed her. Touch me and give me access to the program. The sphere floated towards the display, heedless of the monsters and their lasers. His surface was a deeper color now, and the liquid currents underneath were becoming agitated and violent. No, Alita protested. You have to tell me what will happen to you afterwards. Alita, stop it! Don't be foolish. Now touch me. The girl lowered her hands and stepped back. The mantis showered down a hail of lasers on the sphere while the lights inside grew darker and darker until it became deep in midnight black. Hopper, Alita, your program is losing stability. There's only 40% left, Jeremy calculated, fearful. 30, 20. Alita approached her father. Daddy, don't go, she murmured, crying. Manta fired off another shot and she hesitated, seemingly losing consistency. Then she leapt against the sphere with the whole of her body. She embraced her father. For a moment she felt between her arms a person of flesh and blood. Alita, Jeremy cried. Mr. Hopper! The sphere dissipated. No explosions, no noise, as if it had never existed. A dense wave of liquid energy poured through the city of Carthage, and then it spread to the other sectors of the Oko, flowing in every direction. An unstoppable tide. It flooded the mountains, the digital trees, the rocks of the desert sector, and the frozen lakes. It was a tidal wave that was hunting Xana down, following its tracks and traces. The white liquid became a mass of tentacles that were released in search of new fragments, possible new hiding places. All the Lyoko monsters, as soon as they were touched by the liquid or the tentacles, dissolved one by one into colorful bubbles. But they were unimportant, only the little fishes. When it was finally overcome by the sea of energy, Xana let loose a scream of rage and frustration, while his digital body was destroyed piece by piece. In the old factory, William too let out a howl of pain, bending over until he was doubling in on himself. His head tipped towards the ceiling, and from his wide-open mouth there gushed a dense smoke, black as pitch, which twisted into wide circular coils before disappearing into nothingness. William Dunbar fainted. Several meters beneath him, Odd was holding Yumi gripped in his arms. He had managed to save her at the last second, breaking her fall with his own body, after William had hurled her down from the scaffold. Are you all right? He asked her. Yes, and you? Odd nodded, laughing. Aside from a few dents and bruises, you should consider going on a diet. Odd, Yumi, Ulrich, and Jeremy. They all stood firm in silence in the scanner room. They were waiting for the doors of the final booth to open and return Alita to them. Jeremy's heart was hammering in his chest, and behind the thick lenses of his glasses his eyes were red with emotion. And finally, there she was. Alita staggered out of the scanner. She looked at them one by one, and then took a step towards Jeremy, her face scarred by tears. He's dead, isn't he? My father. Nobody answered her. Instead, the 4 children drew near to her, all together, and wrapped her in a silent hug.